I have seen all of the RWBY series up to the point where it's currently been released. I stumbled upon it during its second season, and I remember seeing it advertised on YouTube's thumbnails, but I ignored it for a time as I felt it was just going to be another one of those random online shows. I had no idea what it was really about. One day, for whatever reason, I ended up giving it a shot, and I ended up surprisingly enjoying what I found. This 3D animated cartoon anime show with really, really cool fight scenes done with the 3D models, as well as a very interesting world and concepts that were being set up to be explored deeper. Of course, the characters and their designs were also very eye-catching as well, and so I was on for the ride, and especially during Season 3 as everything ramped up there, waiting week to week to see the next episode, it really felt like something special. My opinion on the show began to change a bit after then though, as it took a different direction, one that I was far less fond of, with a lot more slow-paced political intrigue. And I'm someone who enjoyed Game of Thrones, but RWBY's take on that sort of idea didn't really do it for me, and it also meant we were getting less of the action scenes that I was there for. On top of this, the characterization also got played around with a bit, and I began to actively dislike a lot of the cast based on how they had changed over time. There were numerous decisions here and there that just piled on to the point where now my favour with that show has fallen quite dramatically, and I have actually done a video on that in the past, so feel free to check that out if you're interested to see what my thoughts were back then. All of that is to say, I'm someone who has some form of residue interest in RWBY, just not so much in the current show and how it went. But the concepts are still very appealing, and I'm not alone in seeing that potential of the property whilst not being fully on board with the decisions that have been made for it. Many fans have taken to making their own reinterpretations of the RWBY story, and there are also, I think, 3 different official comics and books that also do a retelling. I haven't read them myself. So then, one day, RWBY Ice Queendom is announced to be worked on by an anime studio, and it will be a fresh start that will take the world and put its own spin on it. This was very interesting for me. I remember that some people were cautioning this, that it would be just another repeat like the books apparently were, and that they weren't too keen on the idea of going backwards. But for me personally, this sounded exactly like what I was looking for. Going back to what I liked and then moving forward in a different way, hopefully a way I prefer. There was obviously a very big difference, being that it would be a 2D animation rather than a 3D animation, but that never really bothered me. And if anything, I was quite excited because I felt like it would translate really well into 2D. So I was very much looking forward to watching this show. Having seen the 3 available episodes of RWBY Ice Queendom so far, I would have to wholeheartedly recommend that you give the show a watch and see if you enjoy it for yourself. If you've been a fan of the earlier seasons of the normal show, I see no downside to this version. And if you do enjoy the current RWBY, you might still get something out of the additional depth to the characters here. And for those of you who may have never watched RWBY at all, I recommend giving this version a try. Since it's new, you'll be up and coming with the story as it progresses, and you won't need to have seen the longer original series to feel caught up on. The animation, the story, and the way the characters are handled here make it quite interesting and easy to follow, so I do recommend you at least try it, since the first episodes are free, to see if it's up your alley. With that said though, the rest of this video is going to go over the content of those 3 episodes, so if you think you may be interested in checking it out, This is where I'm going to have to give you a spoiler warning and suggest you come back later. So now's your chance to leave if you have any intention of going through this blind. Where to begin with this show? As a quick overview, the entire premise of Ice Queendom, as far as I can tell, is an alternate telling of the RWBY narrative, because we start at the beginning the same way as we did in the previous version, but then we'll begin branching out as it takes its own path. Events from that original still mostly occur, but at a faster pace, with some details that were changed to improve the flow. I do not feel like anything of major value was lost in this, and in fact enjoy the way this version of the show presents itself. Right from the start, the show spends more time developing the characterizations of the characters. RWBY is introduced talking to her mother's grave, where the audience gets to learn both a bit about her optimistic attitude, as well as some context for how her sister Yang will be entering the Beacon Academy. The bond between RWBY and Yang is given much more attention even in the first scene. It is made clear how RWBY doesn't just like her sister, but looks up to her. The additional context also helps frame the robbery scene, as this time we know RWBY was there to get a surprise gift for Yang. We also get to learn that RWBY and Yang's father Tai believes RWBY will benefit from Yang's absence as a way of gaining some independence, which is something that will stick with Yang later in the show. I like how this revised introduction to RWBY introduces her family and establishes character goals, all while still taking place around the dust shop robbery. The animation in this show has been great for these first 3 episodes. Combat has been a different rhythm, as now it's animated in 2D with less frames, making it feel a little slower than the original, but still entertaining for me. And most of all, the art in general just looks really good. RWBY taking out the thugs still looked amazing. Something interesting is how the rival character Cinder is only briefly teased without displaying her power, unlike in the original, which shows some restraint on the writer's behalf, considering the many other things that get established during these early episodes. Something this show definitely benefits from is hindsight. Many small decisions have been made to incorporate plot details that simply didn't exist when the first season was created, and other elements that didn't really fit anywhere in the originals were omitted so as to not waste any time. Before these episodes dropped, there was some chatter on whether Weiss would replace RWBY as the main character. As of right now, I think it's fair to say she rivals RWBY for screen time, but really, this show seems to be aiming to give all the characters a fair amount of spotlight. Weiss and Blake are introduced with scenes based on their reveal trailer events. Blake's mostly operates as usual, which is not a problem. We get to see Adam not act like a whiny child, which is very refreshing, whilst the weapon Blake uses seems to have been given a bit of a visual upgrade. For Weiss, her battle with the giant is now contextualized as a final test by her family before being allowed to join Beacon, rather than taking place in a void. Her powers are shown to be very versatile in this fight, which did make me worry they were making her overpowered, but then I remembered how in the original 3 seasons the cast were pulling off maneuvers that were far more impressive than in later volumes. Presumably, this time, they will simply maintain this level of proficiency rather than lose it to make the Grimm appear stronger artificially. After all the characters from Team RWBY are introduced, we are shown their journey on the transport ship. Like last time, this is where they get their first interactions with one another. However, certain elements have been brought forward to also occur on the plane, such as the briefing on what their first test will be. The result of this is that the show gets straight to the action, rather than prolonging the downtime further if they had gone to the school first before the mission. Up until this point, all the changes have been for the sake of streamlining the flow and clarifying plot points which were overlooked in the original, but at the launch pad scene we get our first instance of a genuinely new element to the story of Ice Queendom. An eye-catching, mysterious character is established as a veteran and has some connections with the staff of Beacon. She is a part of a new plot thread revolving around a Grimm that uses dreams to drain people of their aura and grow more Grimm. So far, I approve of her inclusion. I think it helps the setting to have another staff member to really sell the schooling environment, and visually, her techniques are quite impressive. Definitely something I think fits into RWBY, whilst also not being what I would have come up with myself. One of the biggest action scenes of these episodes involves the Grimm attack as the students were claiming their chess pieces. The character dialogue that takes place here is a step up over the original, and the fight choreography is not bad either. However, some parts of the original still landed better to me. Namely, when RWBY runs up the side of the mountain, this animation has less frames to convey the speed as well as it did before, but at the same time, the landing after decapitating the Grimm looks great. I can't say this enough, but I am a big fan of the character writing on display. We are given many more examples of their traits in this show, and the writers use this to help inform the audience on why the cast act in the ways they do. Pre-existing character moments are given more depth, and then additional ones have been added, whilst a lot of the Monster of the Week fluff from the early seasons has been removed. When Jorn's teammates delve into his mind to rescue him, we get a nice glimpse into the burden his family's reputation has put upon him. I will criticise how everyone has apparently become Jorn's trusted friends, when it's unclear just how long they've spent together in the show. Obviously, this was done to keep things moving, but a more clear indication of time passing before that scene would have helped. The important part about Jorn's nightmare, though, is how it serves to demonstrate and explain the abilities of this new Grimm. A very relevant lesson, as it's made apparent Weiss herself has also been infected, but due to her greater power, she has been able to stave it off for far longer. Not much else is brand new for these episodes, mostly sticking to characterization and plot development. Sun and Penny still get introduced much in the same way as they did before, and Weiss still has a falling out with Blake over her heritage. The battle at the docks is skimmed over, but I imagine this is again a creative decision to hurry us past familiar events and get to the newer content. The finale shows Weiss fall into her own nightmare trap whilst alone in the dorms, the implications of which we are yet to know. Overall though, I am most impressed with Ice Queendom. It gave the original story a breath of fresh air and is taking things in its own direction. Watching this reminded me of what I liked about RWBY when I first discovered it. Hopefully they diverge enough not to repeat the mistakes of the original. I also was surprised by how well the voice cast went with the characters. Typically, I watch shows like this in English, but since I had no option this time, I went with the Japanese voice options, and they really put their all into bringing the characters' personalities to life. Comparing this to the original, I think I do prefer Ice Queendom. Naturally, it helps that I've seen the original, so I know the details excluded in Ice Queendom, whilst also getting to see those 3D fights, but the few wins the classics have are not enough to overrule the perks of this version for me. That will be all from me today though. What do you think of the RWBY series? Did you watch these episodes? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. Please share it if you enjoyed what I had to say. I hope you have a great day, and to see you next time. This is the Mighty Emperor, signing off.